Howdy folks, welcome back to Doing Brew. And hey, right off the bat, just a reminder that the old farmhouse renovation project will immediately follow the kitchen remodel series. So be sure and subscribe so you don't miss any videos as Doing Brew undertakes the renovation of this beautiful 200-year-old farmhouse. And just a reminder that Doing Brew recently launched its Patreon page. If you're interested in supporting the channel through Patreon, there will be a link at the end of this video and in the description. Now, let's get started on today's project. A Craftsman style surround to cover the opening in the wall that we cut out to allow for the peninsula countertop. This is a great companion project to last week's video, the Craftsman style window surround. And this Craftsman theme on the window, the entry into the utility room, and now over the peninsula countertop is really going to tie the whole project together. First thing we got to do is remove the temporary electrical attachments for our pendant lights over the peninsula countertop. In video 12 of the complete kitchen remodel series, I built out a Craftsman style window surround, and I provide a tremendous amount of detail into how that project goes together. Many of the components of this project are the same, so if you're interested, please check out video 12 of the kitchen remodel series for a more in-depth description of all of the components that goes into any type of Craftsman style surround. Step one to building out our Craftsman style surround is to cut out our jamb boards. There are three, one on the top and one on each side. Simple process of measuring the opening, marking it to length, and making our cut. Now, prior to installing this first board, we need to measure and mark for our wire connections for our pendant lights. So just measuring out from the right jamb, and then I'm going to mark for center. So this is slightly less than a 5-inch board, so I'm going to mark over 2 3/8 and then check that to make sure that it is in fact centered, and we're looking good. Now, just as you saw me do in the base cabinet install video, I'm going to use my spade bit here, and I'm going to drill about halfway through the board, and then I'm going to flip it over and then finish that hole. That prevents any tear out in the wood. And while the top of this board will never be seen, it's just a habit I'm in, makes for a much cleaner cut. Now I'm going to use some construction adhesive along the entire surface of this board. And yes, it's wood meets wood, strictly speaking, but I prefer to use construction adhesive here rather than wood glue that you tend to use for joinery work. Now that we've got our top casing board up, we're going to put our long level on the length of the board just to ensure that we're level across. And as it turns out, you'll see in a moment, we're actually high on the left side. Now I'm going to put one nail in the low side of the jamb, and we're going to level it out with a couple of shims. Once we have that perfectly level, we'll secure it with this finish nail. Now, as I mentioned, we're high on the left side of our top jamb board here. Alex is just verifying that for the most part we're level, but as you move over to the left side, it is in fact high. So we're going to have to shim that out here in just a moment, and you'll see as we place our left jamb board in place. You can see the block of wood that we have fixed up there in the corner. Alex made sure the dry fit was good. Now, applying construction adhesive and securing that jamb board in place. Now, that gap at the top does look a little unsightly, but of course no one's ever going to see that once we attach the beadboard, the frieze, and the cornice. Of course, our entablature on top of our side casings. Now, since this is a wood to wood application, we're using tight bond wood glue where finished wood meets finished wood as I secure the right casing board. Okay, next up we need to measure for our first side casing cut. So as I did with the Craftsman style window surround, this board is cut to 1/8 inch longer than the opening itself. And that way you'll have a nice 1/8 of an inch reveal running across the entire top of the project. Now I'll touch on this again in a moment, but you may have noticed that I use both construction adhesive and tight bond wood glue to affix this piece of side casing to our surround. I'll touch on that again in just a moment. Okay, so we'll call that the left side casing as you look at the surround from inside the kitchen. Now we're going to cut the right side casing from your vantage point in the kitchen. Now, just as before, we're going to have to rip this one down to approximately 4¼ inches wide. That's to accommodate the cabinets. Now, here you can see construction adhesive and tight bond wood glue. Construction adhesive adheres wood to the painted surface, while the wood glue assists with the wood to wood connection. So I'm using both there just to ensure we cover all bases. Now you can see that I'm using my 1/8 of an inch spacer block there to ensure that I get an 1/8 of an inch reveal. Highly recommend if you're going to do a Craftsman style surround and you want to have that 1/8 of an inch reveal that you make yourself a little spacer block. Really an indispensable tool. Okay, now we're moving to the outside, facing into the kitchen from the dining room, and we're going to cut the left casing. So what I just did here is trued up the end of the board. Now I'm going to flip it over. We'll mark it for length and make our cut. Okay. Now, as before, we cut this board 1/8 of an inch longer than the opening itself so that we have that 1/8 of an inch reveal between our side casings and our entoplature. Some construction adhesive and tight bond wood glue. If you've watched my other videos on Craftsman style surrounds, you constantly hear me talking about the 1/8 inch reveal. Now, why is that important? Well, it's kind of personal preference, but you'll find that a lot of finished carpenters will tell you that moldings and surrounds are all about the shadow lines. And so that 1/8 inch reveal provides one more shadow line, a little bit of depth to your project, and some added interest to your profile. The next time you see an intricate molding detail, take a look at it. Are you looking at the different types of moldings, or are you looking at the shadows and the curves in the wood? And that's what really draws your attention. And just taking a quick moment to fill all the nail holes with spackling. Now we're getting ready to cut the right side casing. What was that little critter? That's Rika, teacup chihuahua that kept us company through this entire project. Alright, so we're making a 45-degree cut on this casing, the right casing, as you look into the kitchen from the dining room. And that 45-degree cut will adjoin a trim piece that cuts underneath the granite countertop. Now, as you can see, we need to make a special cut here, which is no more difficult than drawing a couple of lines using our carpenter's square to measure out or account for the thickness of our countertop. And now, how far in do we need to make that cut? Well, about 5/8 of an inch, just slightly less than 3/4 of an inch, and that will, of course, ensure our 1/8 of an inch reveal. Simple cut with the jigsaw. nice tight fit, which is exactly what we're looking for.
No.
And the dry fit looks pretty nice. We've got a nice 1/8 inch reveal there, allowed by our cut. So some construction adhesive and a little bit of tight bond glue, as we've done on all of our side casings, and we'll put this in place, nail it, and then we'll move over to the left side of our peninsula, and we're going to build out a beefy two-sided corner using 2 large pieces of our select pine. Now, no fancy joinery here or anything, it's just 2 pieces of wood that are glued and nailed together. But as you'll see in just a moment, they will ensure that we cover up the bitter edge between the drywall and the construction framing members there on the end of our peninsula. So you can see just a simple corner just nailed together. We'll fit that in place, and then when that's in place and painted to match all the rest of the trim, it's seamless, and it actually provides a nice beefy look of supporting our granite countertop. Now here's the last piece of trim work we need around our granite. There's 1 long board, straight cut on the left side, 45 on the right to match that 45-degree cut on that right casing we did with that special cut. This will go together real nicely. Of course, wood glue where the wood meets the wood, and construction adhesive everywhere else. Okay, that fits into place. And we've got that good stud material on the top and bottom. We'll secure that with some finish nails. And then we'll put a couple of finish nails into the end just to help to keep that miter nice and tight until that wood glue sets up. Once that glue sets up, that miter joint is going to be solid for years to come. That's a pretty nice look. We'll sand that joint there and then paint it up, and it'll look beautiful. Okay, now we're going to get to work on our entablature. The first piece is the frieze, and again, simple measurement here. The frieze board is the exact measurement between your 2 side casings. And here, just doing a quick dry fit to make sure we've got our measurement right. We'll take that down and apply our bead board to the bottom of our frieze. This is the bottom of our entablature, and the bead board is just a simple screen door molding you can get at your local home store. And the bead board is cut to 1 inch longer than your frieze, and then centered on your frieze to provide a 1/2 inch overhang on both sides. And as you see me do throughout the project, I'll go ahead and fill those nail holes so that spackling can set up and I can sand it before we put it overhead. Okay, now we're going to turn our assembly over and begin working on the cornice. The cornice is made up of 2 boards. 1 piece of flat stock, which is 5/4 stock or 1 inch thick, and 1 piece of small crown. It's actually a large cove molding, but it's classified as a crown, and this forms the cornice of our entablature, the very top of our Craftsman style surround. Now, the very top board is cut to overall 5 inches longer than the frieze. That will allow for a nice overhang on both sides and plenty of room to mount that crown molding. And of course, it's wood meets wood, so tight bond wood glue and some finish nails. We will flip the whole thing over and begin to install our crown molding. And as you can see, it's a pretty small crown molding, but a nice beefy cove molding really sets off the cornice of this entablature really nicely. Really nice look. Now, of course, all of the wood that I'm using in today's project is readily available at your local home store. I bought all of this material at Home Depot. The majority of the flat stock, in fact all of it, is 3/4 inch material, with the exception of the top of the cornice, which, as I mentioned, is 5/4 or 1 inch thick. Okay, we've got those nails filled and sanded, and we'll set our entablature in place on top of our side casings. Now, as I mentioned in the Craftsman style window surround video, of which there's a whole lot more detail in how to build out a Craftsman style surround. It's really important that the outside edges of your frieze and the outside edges of your side casings line up on both the left and right side of your surround. And that's pretty much it. Of course, we had to build out an entablature on both sides, but it's not that hard to do. We've knocked out this project in less than half a day. We'll make sure that all of our nail holes, gaps, and seams are filled with spackling and sanded. Alex here is reinstalling the old baseboard molding that was part of the house before we started this project. And of course, we really wanted to reuse this baseboard molding because it's a beefy, solid wood molding that you just really can't find anymore unless you have it custom cut at a mill. After we reinstalled, filled the nail holes, the gaps and seams, and painted it up, it looked beautiful, just like brand new. And finally, it's time to finish this project, literally. And what you see on here now are 2 coats of primer. And I really like to use the Sherwin-Williams wall and wood primer, mostly because it provides excellent coverage, but also because it sands really nicely. A lot of latex-based primers, you just can't get it to sand nicely, where the Sherwin-Williams will sand real nicely, and the paint comes off as a fine powder. Now, you may want to check out my painting trim work video. I'll provide a link to that at the end of this video. That provides a lot of tips and tricks on how to get a real nice finish on your painted trim work. Now, when you complete a project like this and you get to this stage, to me it's really a lot of fun because all these different pieces of wood really become one integral piece of furniture. The paint just ties it all together, and it really is beautiful, especially when you have your trim work painted this nice bright white against the real pretty medium green paint or gray paint in the kitchen. Really makes your surrounds and your trim work pop. Now, we're almost to the end of the video, but make sure you stay tuned just so you can see the previews of our last final video in the kitchen remodel series. That preview will be coming up here in just a moment. So as you can see, I don't use painter's tape because honestly, I found that if I use painter's tape, I get kind of sloppy with the paint and I end up getting paint squeezing under that painter's tape. I found that I can save a lot of time and a lot of money just by getting used to using a steady hand and cutting in without any tape. That said, I have found great value in painter's tape in applying caulking, especially where the caulking is going to be right out in the open, right in your line of sight, and you want a incredibly crisp, tight line. So as you can see, I'm going to apply that painter's tape and only have about a 1/16 of an inch gap left on my countertop. Then I'm going to apply the caulking, and then I'm going to remove the majority of it. If you use the painter's tape, you don't want to leave a big glob of caulking, because then when you pull the tape up, you're going to have like a ledge of caulking. So you really want to smooth that out until there's almost no caulking left. Because remember, we're not sealing up anything. We're not trying to keep water out. We're just looking for a nice, crisp line to finish off our trim work where it meets the countertop. And that, to me, looks really sharp. And previews coming up in just a moment. But that completes our Craftsman style surround over our Peninsula countertop. And I think it looks really, really sharp. A nice, bold surround with a beautiful cornice or entablature. Nice clean lines. And of course it ties everything together. because all the rest of the trim work is that same Craftsman style design throughout the kitchen, including the window that we completed in video 12. And here's a preview of video 14, the conclusion of the complete kitchen remodel series. We'll show you how to use a couple of simple tricks of the trade to line up all of your doorknobs and drawer pulls without having to do any measuring whatsoever. Makes for a quick work. Plus, we'll install our pendant lights over our peninsula countertop. Really finishes things off nicely. And we'll put in an Edison bulb, which really pops in this really nice pendant light. Plus, we'll connect up the final appliance, the new dishwasher, and complete the installation, which will bring to an end the complete full kitchen remodel series. I hope to see you next time on this last video, folks, as we complete this beautiful project and get ready to move on to the renovation of the old farmhouse. Thanks a lot for watching this video, folks. If you have any questions at all, leave them in the comments or send me an email to doandbrew@gmail.com. See you back here next time on Do and Brew. Take care, folks.